Okay, testing, 1, 2, 3. The sound is good here. How about for people online? How is the sound?
Yes, Bhante, we can hear you.
Okay.
Good. Yeah, good, Bhante.
I see somebody, iPhone, has a raised hand. Did you have something to say? Okay, so the recording is in progress. And so we can start then. We start with the homage to the Buddha, the salutation. Just do it one time. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. Okay, so good morning, everybody. And so today is May 18th. And so we are approaching the Vesak full moon, so that is the day that celebrates the birth, the enlightenment, and the passing away of the Buddha. So it will be actually the actual full moon, I think, is May 23rd. But many places are celebrating Vesak this weekend, like here at Zhuangyan tomorrow, other places next weekend. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen now, so we're going to be continuing with our reading of these sixes. How is it that I have it in two versions? Okay. Okay, is the screen visible?
Yes, Bhante.
And I'm going to increase the point size. Is the size okay?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay. Okay, so we're continuing now to read the Anguttara Nikaya, the Numerical Discourses. We are in the Book of Sixes. And now we come to Sutta number 31. And as I mentioned, I'm not going to be taking every sutta, but jumping around and taking the more interesting, more relevant ones. And this sutta is concerned with the qualities, on the one hand, that lead to the decline or deterioration of a monk who is a trainee, one who is in training, and then the opposite, the 6 qualities that lead to the non-decline of a monk who is a trainee. And I think we'll just focus on the qualities that lead to non-decline, taking the positive side of the coin, so to speak. Okay, so I mentioned in the mailing that even though the sutta is concerned with the qualities of a monastic person, but I think it's also relevant for all of us who are in some way engaged with the training, with practicing the Buddha's path, to be aware of these type of qualities, since these will be qualities and practices that are conducive to our progress, even though because of our life conditions, our situation, we might not be able to fulfill them all perfectly, but we should at least have an aspiration to try to follow them to the best of our ability. And so these 6 qualities, actually we could take in turns the pairs of qualities. The 6 qualities that lead to decline is taking delight in work. And the opposite of that, what leads to non-decline, non-deterioration, is not taking delight in work. And maybe first just take the concept of decline and non-decline. So this would be, perhaps we could formulate this in different ways, the decline of one's spiritual faculties to especially the weakening of one's energy, mindfulness, concentration, and insight. And then the opposite of that, non-decline, is really an indirect way of speaking about what leads to progress, to the strengthening of those faculties of energy, mindfulness, concentration, and insight wisdom. And so for one who is engaged in the meditative path, one wants to, in a sense, simplify one's life and sort of clear away the non-essentials in order to focus on the essentials. In the Dhammapada, there's a verse, one of the early verses, which says that those who do not know how to distinguish what is non-essential from what is essential, they range in wrong thought. Whereas those who know how to distinguish the essential from the non-essential, their range is that of right thought. Okay, so here, a quality that leads to decline for a monk is said to be delight in work. And the actual Pali word here, the Pali word that's used here is the word kamma. Yeah, but all of us, every moment that we're active, we're creating kamma. So the word kamma is being used here in a particular sense, not in the general sense of volitional action that creates karma, but activities, work activities. And you might wonder, for a monk, what is the kind of work that they delight in? There's a particular, I have to say, particular illness that affects monks at monasteries, and that is construction work. So there's, like when a monk comes to take charge of a monastery, he looks around, sees that a certain building is lacking, and then thinks, we need a new hall here. We need a new this kind of building. And so then he will mobilize all of the other monks to start working on constructing new buildings. And in that way, they spend almost a whole day involved in work activities, and then they don't have time for their meditation practice. Of course, in certain monasteries whose function is to serve the needs of the lay community, having a lot of halls and buildings is quite necessary. But this is for the monks who are devoted to the meditative life. For them to delight in this work and to become addicted to it and obsessed with it is a quality that will be a kind of detour that leads away from the practice. I remember years ago hearing about a certain monastery. When a new monk joins that monastery, one of the questions they ask him is, what do you feel most comfortable with? Carpentry, plumbing, or electrical work? Okay, so if one is going to have the time to devote especially to intensive meditation practice, then one has to avoid getting entangled and embroiled in a lot of work. But this doesn't mean that you remain completely aloof from the activities of the monastery, since will always be work at any monastery, and the work has to be divided up evenly, and everybody has to contribute their share to keep the monastery functioning. So in that way, at any monastery, all of the fit, capable resident monks, or in the nunnery, nuns, will have different work activities assigned to them. And to promote an atmosphere of harmony, collaboration, cooperation, everybody has to contribute their share to keep the monastery functioning. So even you could say giving classes is a kind of work. Giving sermons or discourses is a kind of work. seeing that the grounds are kept neat and clean is a kind of work. In some monasteries with a lot of grass, mowing the lawn will be a kind of work. And not in the Theravada tradition, but in the Chinese tradition, where the monasteries developed far from populated areas, it became part of the job of the monastics to do the cooking in the monastery. And so there would be teams of monks who would rotate, taking turns cooking. Another team would take the responsibility for washing the dishes and cleaning up after the meal. And so there will be various work assignments that are an inevitable part of monastic life. But in order to make progress, one has to avoid getting, as I said, obsessed with this work, overburdened with this work, and taking delight in it. One always has to allocate some time to one's practice. I remember years ago when I was in Sri Lanka meeting some monks, and they would be asked about how is your meditation coming, and they would say, "Oh, I'm just too busy to practice." But that seems to me like a shallow excuse, that if one is really sincerely dedicated to the development of the path, one will find a way to reduce one's work commitments and reserve periods of time each day for one's practice. Okay, now if one is a householder, of course, one has to work at a job, could be 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours a day, traveling back and forth, could add another hour or two. And then you have family responsibilities. So those are some of the commitments that one makes by remaining in the household life. But still, if one wants to make progress in one's practice, I say one should always be able to find some time every day, even if you can allocate only 20 or 30 minutes to your meditative practice. At least devote that amount of time to the practice, because then you'll be building up a foundation which will gain momentum over time. And that will help you in your day-to-day life. So through your period of meditation practice, when you meet the various demands of your working life, family life, you can meet those demands with balance of mind, with equanimity, with clear comprehension, and be more effective in fulfilling those responsibilities. Okay, so that is not taking delight in work. Okay, the next one, many people find very, very difficult, and that is not to take delight in talking. And of course, in our everyday life, we have to talk to other people. We can't just remain silent like animals. Actually, even animals have ways, I think, of talking to each other, communicating to each other. For example, every year in the springtime, 2 geese come and they settle on the grass right in front of the Kuan Yin pavilion here at the monastery. Have you seen them? I didn't see them over the last few days, but it seems that they have a way of communicating when they are going to go into the lake. They go into the lake together, and when they know it's time to leave this area, probably during the summer, to fly north, they're Canadian geese, to fly to Canada, somehow they have a way of one communicating to the other, hey, it's time for us to leave. Okay, so if animals have ways of communicating to each other, then certainly human beings have to communicate. So we have to engage in talk. But for a serious practitioner, it's important to limit one's talk. And the Buddha gives the advice to the monastics. He says, when you get together, sometimes when the Buddha comes onto the scene, when the monks have gathered into the meeting hall, he'll come into the hall. He knows what they're talking about, but he'll say, what are you talking about? And the monks will be a little bit ashamed and say, we've been talking about the latest Taylor Swift concert or about the latest New York Giants. Is it Giants a football team? The New York Mets game. And then the Buddha will scold them and say, that's not suitable for you. When you get together, you should do two things. Either you talk about Dhamma or you maintain noble silence. But in fact, I've been in this monastic scene for over 50 years, and I know that monks can talk about many, many other things, including things that might be relevant to the monastic life, but there are certain topics of conversation that the Buddha specifically says should be avoided. And there is a list of such topics of conversation. Do you see the other file that I just opened?
Yes, Bhante, we can see it.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a kind of stock passage that comes in a number of suttas where the Buddha, or sometimes one of the Buddha's disciples, in this case it's Ananda, approaches an assembly of the outside wanderers, that is, the wanderers of the other sects. And they're sitting around and they're engaged in what are called many kinds of pointless talk. And then these talks that talk about kings, robbers, ministers, armies, battles, food, drink, clothing, beds, garlands, perfumes, relatives, vehicles, villages, towns, cities, countries, women, heroes, streets, wells, and various other topics. Yeah, so this would be sort of engaging in random chit-chat or just idle chatter. And so, it's important for us to be able to carry on conversations with other people in order to establish cordial relations with other people. If you just try to observe complete silence and cut yourself off from human contact without talking about anything, then you'll just be isolated, and it creates maybe tension in your relations with others. So we have to be able to engage even in casual conversations with others, but we have to avoid indulging in this idle chatter. Because when you indulge in idle chatter, then it sort of leaves impressions in the mind. So then when you do your meditation, then sometimes those conversations and topics of discussion, particularly if you get engaged in arguments with other people, then they come bubbling up, the thoughts come bubbling up into the mind and overrun the mind, so that it becomes very difficult to collect the mind and concentrate. And so the Buddha advises for the trainee, the one who is really seriously intent on training, it's important. You can engage in conversations when necessary, but it's important to avoid this delight in talking, this kind of addiction to talking, so that one is always under this compulsion to go on and conversing about this or that topic. So this is not taking delight in talking, especially in idle chatter. But again, if you're living in the household life, a family life, then you have to talk to your husband or your wife. You have to talk to your children. If you have visitors, visiting relatives, you have to converse with them. And so it's essential to carry on to establish cordial human relationships, to have meaningful conversations. But try to avoid allowing the talk just to become diverted into these channels of idle conversation, idle chatter, gossip, talking about movie stars, sports stars, music stars. Okay, so now we come to the third sort of quality of non-decline, and this is not taking delight in sleep. Okay, so of course it's necessary for us, we have to sleep, but what we have to do as a serious practitioner, so first the ideal standard that the Buddha lays down. I took the passage, the relevant passage. Again, let me get that other file. Yeah, this is the quality is called wakefulness, jagarya. And so this is for a practitioner, somebody who's devoting themselves to like full-time meditation practice. So the text says here, during the day, the noble disciple purifies his mind of obstructive states while walking back and forth. That's doing the walking meditation, and sitting, doing the sitting meditation. So this would be like when one is on a retreat, in a retreat situation. So during the day, one passes pretty much the whole day, morning, afternoon, just alternating sitting and walking meditation in order to remove, to overcome the hindrances, the obstructive states. Then the first watch of the night, which might be maybe in India, North India, it will get dark fairly early compared to, say, here in North America. So it might start to get dark about 6 p.m. So let's say 7 to 10 p.m. will be the first watch of the night. Again, one spends the time walking back and forth and sitting, purifying the mind of obstructive states. Then the middle watch of the night, this could be from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. One will lie down, one leg in the lion's posture, mindful and fully aware, and noting in the mind, the time for rising. But actually in ancient India, they wouldn't have had clocks or watches. And so you just make the mental note that when I wake up, then I remain up. So this could be 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. This is for somebody who's practicing very earnestly. The need for sleep will go down. And then after rising in the third watch of the night, we'll say 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., again, they will spend the time walking back and forth and sitting. So that is, I would say, like the ideal practice of wakefulness for somebody intently engaged in full-time meditation. But if we're not engaged in that full-time meditation practice, but still we want to advance in our practice, we have to know how to properly regulate sleep. And different people have different needs for the amount of sleep. They have different amounts of sleep that they need. So some can get by comfortably with even 5 hours of sleep, others 6 hours, some 7 hours, some 8 hours. But what's important is you get the amount of sleep you need to be fresh, vigorous, for the body and mind to be refreshed, and not to return to the bed and to sleep beyond the hours that you actually need for the physical, maintaining the physical vitality of the body. Yeah, the opposite of this, it's depicted as the Buddha describes a person who just rolls around in bed, sleeping excessive hours, and then even during the day, nodding off. And my own practice and advice is during the day, in the early afternoon, just to lie down and to take a short nap of about like 10 or 15 minutes, sort of just like lying down till the mind sort of dives into a state of unconsciousness, then springs right back into consciousness. So about 15 to 20 minutes, and then one is refreshed. Okay, so this is not taking delight in sleep. Okay, this is difficult to avoid, not taking delight in company. Yeah, of course, one keeps company. One has maybe family members, friends that one associates with, and there's nothing reprehensible in that, in keeping company. But what's essential for an earnest practitioner is not to, again, to become addicted to the company of other people, to become completely dependent on that company, and to, the key word here maybe is delight, delighting in the company. Naturally, if you meet your friends, you're going to enjoy their company, you enjoy spending time with them, but one has to know when it's time, after associating with others, when it's time to say, that is enough, now it's time for me to go into seclusion. And again, this is intended specifically for the monastic person who's keen on the training, who wants to make rapid progress in their training. So after spending some time with others, one has to know when to take leave and to go off into seclusion. And so that not taking delight in company is the opposite of that, is paviveka. Yeah, there's a verse that we recite, paviveka. Yeah, paviveka. Yeah, it's spelled wrong. Okay, it's paviveka rama, paveka ratino. So it means taking delight in seclusion, delighting, being delighted with seclusion. Yeah, I keep on typing the wrong letter. Okay, it's paviveka rama, paviveka ratin. Delighting in seclusion, being delighted with seclusion. So one has to be able to, to enjoy solitude, to enjoy spending time alone, not always having to be in the company of others and feeling a kind of anxiety if one is not in constant company of others. Okay, so we've covered 4 of those qualities of the trainee. Then we have 2 two others, which are not a matter of delight. So one is guarding the doors of the sense faculties. So this is, now we're getting sort of more deeply into the training of the mind. And so it's the natural tendency of the senses are to move outward, and particularly to grasp upon delightful and enjoyable objects of the senses. And once you attach to once you delight in the enjoyable objects of the senses, then the mind becomes entangled with those objects, and that will give rise to a kind of longing or attachment to the agreeable objects, and then aversion or repugnance towards the disagreeable objects. And so the Buddha has taught specific training for gaining mastery of the senses. And that training is called restraint over the sense faculties. And so the text, the stock passage says that on seeing a visible form with the eye, the disciple doesn't grasp its signs, the signs of the general impression, and the features are the detailed features of the object. Since if he left the eye faculty unguarded, then these unwholesome states would overrun the mind. These would be states of longing and attachment for the agreeable objects and aversion towards the disagreeable objects. And so instead, one practices restraint over the sense faculties, which doesn't mean that you cover over the eyes and the ears, but when naturally the senses will make contact with their objects, but what one does is to avoid grasping at the signs and features, becoming attached to the signs and the features. And so one guards the eye faculty, undertakes the restraint of the eye faculty, the same with the ears, nose, tongue, the physical body, and I would say really the key is the mind faculty. Of course, naturally the senses will make contact with their objects externally, but what's important is to regulate the mind faculty in the contact with the outer objects and also with the inner objects that appear in the stream of consciousness. The different thought formations, ideas, impressions, memories, expectations that arise. Okay, so this is the guarding the doors of the sense faculties. And then the sixth quality that leads to decline, and its counterpart, the sixth quality that leads to decline is lack of moderation in eating. And the counterpart, the positive counterpart, is moderation in eating. And the word translated as moderation here, matanyuta, means literally knowing the right amount, knowing the correct measure. So we know that the Buddha, during his period of striving for enlightenment, he undertook these extreme practices that were prevalent amongst the ascetics of his period, completely drastically reducing his intake of food, completely fasting for long periods. And after his enlightenment, he rejected that kind of practice. But what he insists upon is knowing the right amount in eating. That is, ensuring that one eats enough in quantity, enough variation to keep the body in good health, but not eating to excess beyond what one needs to sustain good physical health. And to encourage this practice, there is a kind of reflection that monastics are taught. It's really part of our introductory training when we enter the monastic life. One of the reflections that we're taught to do before each meal. Let me find it here. Again, it's a stock passage that comes countless times in the suttas. So how is the noble disciple moderate in eating? Here, patisankha yoniso, that means reflecting wisely or carefully. The disciple takes food not for amusement, not as a way of fun, nor for intoxication, enjoying a lot of different flavors. Oh, I have to confess, it gets living in a Chinese monastery, getting Chinese food every day, it gets a little bit boring. So once in a while, one likes to go out to an Indian restaurant or a Mexican restaurant or Thai restaurant for a change, but that's just natural. Yeah, when I was living in Sri Lanka, every day getting Sri Lankan food, one time, or actually several times, I would have dreams at night of being back in my college days in New York City, then going to Chinatown, and you look down Mott Street, and you see one Chinese restaurant after another, and sometimes we would go to this restaurant, another time to the restaurant on the other side of the street, and then there was a Sichuan restaurant on another street, on Mulberry Street, and a Shanghai restaurant on another street. So I would actually dream about all of that variation. And then the next day, wake up and it's back to the Sri Lankan curries, rice and curries. Okay, now I'm living in a Chinese restaurant. I'm not living in a Chinese restaurant. Living in a Chinese monastery. But once a week, there's a Sri Lankan woman who their family lives not so far from the monastery, so they will bring a variety of the Sri Lankan curries to the monastery, and then I always wait for that day to arrive so I get some change from the Chinese food. But remember, not for amusement, not for intoxication, and not for the sake of physical beauty and attractiveness, but only so that the real purpose of taking the food is for the endurance and maintenance and continuation of this body, for ending discomfort, or for more than discomfort, for ending possibility of harm or illness, and then for supporting the brahmacharya, the spiritual life, the holy life. And then one reflects that I shall end the old feelings, that is the feeling of hunger, without arousing new feelings, that is feelings associated with craving, and I shall be healthy and blameless and live in comfort. And so one is supposed to do this reflection when one sits down at mealtime before one actually partakes of the food. We always do, either verbally or at least mentally, we do this reflection. And so when you do that reflection, it will encourage moderation in eating. So one knows that one eats, just the body knows when you have enough, and then it tells you now you have enough, no need to go on taking more just to indulge the sense of taste. Okay, so these are the 6 qualities. Whoops. Okay, so those are the 6 qualities that lead to the non-decline of a monastic who is in training. So just reviewing them, not taking delight in work or a lot of external activity, not delighting in idle chatter and just random talking, not delighting in excessive sleep, not taking delight in company, guarding the doors of the sense faculties, and moderation in eating. Yeah, okay, maybe we'll take some questions. And the way to pose the question is to go to your Zoom window. You should have a hand symbol. Let me get my Zoom window. Yeah, the hand, it should be on the bottom bar, on one of the bars. You'll see the hand symbol. It could be on its own on the bar, or it could be, there can be one of the functions called reactions. If you click that, then you might get a drop-down menu with the hand symbol. Okay, so I see so far one hand. Let me get the participant. Okay, so this would be Vandana.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante, for your teaching. Very grateful. So I'm just wondering about not taking delight in work. So I was just wondering
No,
that.
wait, the sound is not so loud.
Okay.
Maybe Jason can raise the volume.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Wait, he didn't raise it yet. Okay.
Hi. You. Can I?
Okay, that's better.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's better. Yeah.
Okay, so I was just wondering when we talk about not taking delight in work, so it's even for the monks or any lay people. So if we are working, for example, what we call mindfulness these days as mindfulness, meaning that you stay in the present moment and try to stay in work, do whatever you're doing with 100% your abilities. So that requires some kind of uh, enjoyment
Yeah.
in work you're doing. So I'm just curious to understand it more. I know that some people get very addicted to work and then keep thinking about it, keep uh, doing it over and over. But to just stay in balance, to isn't it be more productive if we just be mindful what we are doing, so that joy comes naturally when you're doing something, and then when you're done, you're not keep thinking about it. Can you just clarify it for me further if you can?
I think the point you made is already quite clear and valid on its own, that when you have to do some work, you do the work you bring mindfulness and clear comprehension to the work. And in that way, you make your work becomes part of your cultivation, part of your meditation practice.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so for example, I'm not in the Ajahn Chah tradition, but what I heard, from monks who were in that tradition in Thailand with Ajahn Chah. So he, unlike some of the other Thai meditation monasteries where the monks would just go off and spend the day pretty much in solitude in their huts or kutis, but Ajahn Chah had a way of training his disciples. He wanted them to learn how to work together as parts of teams. So he would constantly set them on work projects, on like constructing halls and buildings and kutis or huts for other monks, or cleaning the grounds. Every day they would have work periods. But he would always insist that when they do the work, they have to do the work with mindfulness. And in this way, he was able to establish a kind of active meditation, or meditation in action, that the monks would learn. The problem, you see, when you go off and spend all the time in seclusion and just come together for the meal, and then you go back to your hut to spend the rest of the day in seclusion, maybe you can develop like a strong samadhi practice, but you don't know how to deal with other people when you have to get thrown into social situations.
Exactly.
Yeah, you become almost sort of self-absorbed, excuse me.
Maybe you don't even know how to deal with your own defilements if you're not dealing with people.
Yeah, exactly. You can learn how to deal to some extent with thoughts that arise when you're in solitude, but it's when you get thrown into the company of others that other defilements have the chance to arise. And yeah, if you're not trained to deal with others effectively, then you don't know how to deal with those defilements when they arise. You can just be very peaceful when you're alone, but as soon as you get involved with others, then unwholesome states arise. Yeah, that is what the American monk Ajahn Sumedho, often he mentions this in his talks. Before he met Ajahn Chah, he was met shortly after he became a monk. He was able to go off into seclusion and meditate, and he was apparently had a natural disposition for meditation. And so he easily got into these blissful states, but he realized that he needed the guidance of a teacher, and then he connected with Ajahn Chah. He was one of the first Westerners to encounter Ajahn Chah. And Ajahn Chah had him, and he worked together with the other monks. And when this took place, Ajahn Sumedho was able to see how, unwholesome states, particularly a sense of self-righteousness and a superiority conceit and anger, would arise. And then Ajahn Chah sort of trained him to deal with those states in the midst of activity.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, so I see now another hand. Let me get so Gita is next.
Thank you, Bhante, for all your teachings. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you. Bhante, my question is twofold. It's very short and quick. The first part is where you said meditation, like in the afternoon, take a nap, like a short nap.
Yeah.
But for those of us who work, we don't have that option Monday to Friday. We have to work, right?
Yeah.
And by the time I get home from work, I am exhausted. I'm like, not, my age is far more than being 20 or 30. I don't have the energy anymore.
Yeah.
I know meditation gives me that energy. And then you have to incorporate exercise and all these extracurricular things that you have to do in the homely life. So if one incorporates that meditation, vandana, everything early in the morning to a committed practice, is that sufficient? Or should I try to do something for 15 minutes at night? Before I sleep, I try and do metta meditation because I'm a person who rarely has dreams. I don't know how to balance that. That's one part. A quick answer would be great. The second part is vachi sankara. I find that because of my practice, I don't like to in social gatherings, like for example, birthday parties or whatever things that I have compulsory that I should attend, like just show face, right? I find that I don't want to be rude to anybody, and I'm not actually involved in that or interested in that situation. And I want to walk away, but I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of caught in the middle. And then there comes a time I get up and say, I'm sorry, I have to go. And I feel like I might be being rude or offensive to somebody. How can I be gentle?
Okay, so two questions here. Okay, so the first question, excuse me. Yeah, it's good in the evening, even if you just have a short, just can allocate just a short period to practice, then do so. Even if it's just 15 or 20 minutes, then set aside that period. If you're tired, what could be useful, of course, because you're working during the day, then you have some dinner, but try not to make it too heavy a dinner, but
Yes.
enough. Then do a walk around even just around the block. Maybe do walking mindfully, but not in a very tight and focused way, but just to get some fresh air. And that should maybe sort of pick up your spirits and help to dispel the drowsiness. And then before going to sleep, then doing like even 15 to 20 minutes of a meditation, whether metta or mindfulness of breathing, whatever you prefer, would be good. Okay, then the second question about how to participate in social events without being rude to people. Yeah, here you have to, I would say, to steer a middle way. You don't want to seem too aloof and unsociable. So you socialize with other people to the extent that you can manage it. And then when you feel it's time to go off, then you just politely excuse yourself.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure you could find that everybody has to find their own middle way, but you can judge from your circumstances how to do it in the most skillful way.
Thank you.
And I think if you develop metta, loving kindness, then people will feel your loving kindness. And so when you take your leave, people won't be hurt. Okay, let us continue. We have another question from Yus.
Thank you, Bhante. My question is about noble silence, and like does silence, not speaking, is quite easy to understand. What is noble silence? Is there any special meaning? I read somewhere that maybe this refers to the mind chatter, that it refers maybe to the second jhana where there is no vitakka and vichara. Is this correct?
Yeah, that is the way the commentary explains it. But I have to say, I don't agree with the commentary here. I think by noble silence, the Buddha means that one just maintains silence. Well, actually, since he's referring to the monks who are gathered together, maybe he indicates that they're sitting together silently in meditation. And maybe the reason why it's said to be, the commentary identifies this with the second jhana, is because even in the first jhana, there are still present vitakka vichara, that is thinking and examination, which are the forces behind verbal speech. And so those vitakka vichara stop in the second jhana. So that's why the commentary identifies noble silence with the second jhana. But I would regard that as a forced interpretation. I think the idea here is that if you're not going to speak about anything related to the Dhamma, then you just keep silent. And that silence is considered noble.
Thank you.
It's different from the silence of somebody who is just, unwilling to speak, unable to speak. But this is a silence maintained because one doesn't want to indulge in frivolous chatter. Okay, I see that there's a Sally.
Hello, Bhante. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. My question, you probably have spoken on it too. In your reading, you said something about how for serious practitioners, like monks, they have this like in their day.
Some noise is coming.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Let me just, okay, I'm going to mute the other. Okay, you speak now.
Okay. So I wanted to know, like for monks, most of their days dedicated to practicing, but for lay people, where we have so many things coming, and maybe we could do at most maybe an hour
Yeah.
meditation. Is there really progress? Do you really make progress when you're not dedicating so much time to the practice?
Of course, the amount of progress that one makes depends very much, it's very, very individualized. It varies so much from one person to another. But what I would say is that any amount of time that you can devote to meditation will be a contributing factor in making progress. So even if it seems that when you're sitting in meditation that you're just, in a sense, running through again all of the thoughts that ran through your mind in the course of the day, or just repeating the work routines of the day, or planning your activities for the following day. But you're, in a way, building up through that practice, you're building up some resistance to those tendencies and laying a foundation for developing calm and concentration and equanimity. So never sort of disparage the limited amount of time that you're able to devote to your meditation. I say if somebody can manage only 20 minutes a day, only 15 minutes a day, then devote that 15 or 20 minutes to the practice and never dismiss it as insignificant or useless. It's a contributing factor. It's like, okay, if you're traveling, say, from New York to, say, you have a flight from New York to Los Angeles, and you have to step out from your house and then lock the door and bring your luggage to the car or a taxi to go to the airport, don't disparage the importance of stepping out of your house and getting into the car because you're not on the flight going to from the airport to Los Angeles, but that's part of getting to the airport and making the flight. If you don't step out of the house and walk to the car, you're never going to get to the airport. Okay, so we'll continue. We'll see how many we can fit in. So the next one will be BC Deborah. Are you on mute? Okay.
Hi, Bhante. Thank you for taking my question. This is Deborah's partner. I have a lot of chronic pain. And when I think about the doors to the sense faculties, I feel like my door is like stuck open. So first, I'm hoping you have some kind of practice that will automatically eliminate my pain. But in the absence of that, is there something you could recommend that will help me not be so, preoccupied with it? And I always feel like I'm at the mercy of my pain levels.
Yeah, I have to tell you that I also have a chronic pain condition. It's a chronic headache condition, which often it's so severe that I can't get up and engage in any activity. Like even last week, a couple of days, it's sort of conditioned partly by the weather, kind of moist, cool weather. So a couple of days, I was just really lying in the bed almost all day. Okay, so what to do under those conditions? Okay, what you can do, and don't overstrain yourself, but well, if you have to lie down, then lie down. But you can turn the focus on the pain itself and make the pain an object of observation. Just focus on the pain and let the mind sort of settle into the pain and just watch the pain. And so you're not identifying with the pain and letting the pain sort of dominate you and govern you, but you're turning it into an object of observation. And you could watch the pain, watch fluctuations in the severity of the pain. Sometimes, even within a minute or so, you could see it's sometimes more severe, then this lighten up a little bit, then it might tighten again. So you could just, watch the pain, watch the changes in the pain, and try to, there are various reflections that you can do. One reflection that I find helpful is to think that this pain is a special challenge that is helping me to progress in the path. Since if everything was just light and pleasant and everything is going according to my wishes, then you don't meet that challenge of dealing with pain. So you could think that this pain is even a gift that is helping me to develop patience and equanimity. And also it provides an opportunity for developing compassion, for understanding that there are people who are experiencing much more severe pain than you are experiencing. So you could use some of those kinds of reflection for dealing with pain.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, so I see Doran. What is the correct pronunciation?
Duran.
Duran. Okay.
Hello, Bhante, and thank you. Just a curiosity, does there exist a group of people in the world who speak to each other in Pali? Is there a conversational group? Has anyone tried to revive the conversational aspects of the language?
I remember years ago hearing that when, say, monks from Sri Lanka would visit Myanmar or Burma, since they didn't have a common language, if they didn't have English as a common language, they would use Pali to speak to each other. But I have to say the Burmese pronunciation of Pali is for us, so strange that it's almost incomprehensible, even if we know it. But I know in Sri Lanka that there are some monks who know Pali very, very well and can converse, not only monks, but even some lay scholars who are capable of speaking in Pali. And there was one, he's a lay person. Let me see if I could get his name. He gives lectures in Pali, in excellent Pali. Yeah, the name doesn't come to me. Yep. Yeah, but so there are people who can speak, who can converse in Pali, though it's not commonly done.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to have to end for the day. Okay, so we will end with the sharing of the merits. And then we'll do 3 bows to the Buddha. We have the Buddha image here. Okay, so we share the merits with the devas and the nagas and the other beings, asking them to protect the sasana, the Buddha's teaching, and to protect ourselves and others and the world. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantam anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantam anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantam anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Dukha pata chani dukha baya pata chani baya soka pata chani soka hantu sabe pipanino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. Before we do the bow, I should mention, like next week, speaking about Burmese monks, the librarian here had arranged for a Burmese monk, he's a meditation teacher, named U Aganya, to give a lecture or a Dharma talk at the library. He'll lead a meditation and then give a Dharma talk and then take some questions and answers. So I won't have the class. I'll see if I could arrange. I spoke to Kaidi, the librarian, last Sunday, and she was uncertain whether she could broadcast it. We were going to ask Jason if he could arrange to broadcast it. So Jason said he can do it. So you can come in through Zoom to hear the talk, but he's going to start at 9. It's supposed to be from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. So if you want to join, then join at 9 a.m. Yeah, we'll have an announcement sent out during the week, giving the Zoom link as well. I think we could probably use the same Zoom link, but I will have it sent out. Okay, so we will end now with 3 bows to the Buddha.
And the bow to Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, so
Thank you,
thank you,
Bhante.
everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bhante.
Bhante.
Namo Buddhaya Bhante. Teruvan Sarnai. Be well, Bhante.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bhante.
Bhante. Good to see you,
Thank you,
Bhante.
Sadhu
Take
Bhante.
Thank you
care,
very much
Bhante.
for
Long
the
life and
teaching.
good health.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Bhante.
Bhante.
Yes,
Thank you for the teaching.
Bye, Bhante. Teruvan
Okay,
Sarnai.
Thank you, Bhante.
okay, take
Namo
care.
Gets
Buddhaya.
better,
Take care,
Bhante.
Bhante.
Thank you,
Be
Bhante.
safe. Be well.
Okay,
Okay.
take care.
Thanks, Bhante.
Happy birthday. Thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Yes.